They warned us right from the start not to speak to the river wives. The locals, with their weathered faces and hushed voices, told stories that were part caution, part superstition. They're not human, they said. They haunt the water's edge, waiting for anyone foolish enough to listen. I brushed it off back then, thinking it was just another old wives' tale, a way to scare city folk like me. The river ran thick and slow near the edge of town, winding through dense woods that seemed to swallow sound itself. The kind of place where your footsteps vanish before you even hear them. Where the air is so still, it feels like time is holding its breath. I was drawn there that first night, needing to escape the noise of everything work, people, the city's endless demands. I wanted silence, a place untouched. But on that second night, everything changed. The moon hung low, casting pale light across the water. As I stood there, the quiet wasn't empty anymore. I heard something soft, like a breath drawn from just beneath the surface. Then a voice, a whisper carried on the wind, sweet and terrible, all at once. It called my name, pulling me closer. I was alone, or so I thought. There, in the dark ripples, eyes reflected back at me, too many eyes, too still and knowing. The water wasn't just water anymore. It was alive, watching, waiting, and the river wives, they weren't just stories. They were real, and they had found me. This is the story of what happened next. Why I had to leave everything behind, why I can't forget the faces in the water, and why, if you ever find yourself near a river at night, you should never speak to the river wives, because some warnings aren't meant to be ignored. I haven't told anyone this before. Not really. There have been moments when I've almost opened my mouth, almost let the story slip out, but then I shut down. It's not easy to say aloud what I've seen, what I've felt crawling beneath the surface of those endless, quiet nights. Sometimes I wonder if I'm still hearing things, if it's just the aftershocks of being alone in that cabin deep in the woods. Far from any signal or help, but I can't shake it. The memories claw at me, like something alive, something that doesn't want to be forgotten. So here I am, finally telling you, because I just need someone to listen. You see, I took that job thinking it would be a kind of salvation. The city was unbearable, a noisy chaos of people and problems I couldn't escape. I thought the isolation would give me peace. I pictured myself in a small, remote cabin by a river, surrounded by trees, with nothing but the sounds of nature for company. No neighbors, no distractions, no technology buzzing in my pocket. No signal, just the quiet. It sounded perfect. The kind of place where you can heal, reflect, maybe even disappear from the world for a while. But it wasn't like that at all. At first, the silence was peaceful. It was almost too quiet, but in a good way. The kind of quiet that lets your mind slow down and breathe. But as the days passed, the silence started to feel heavier, thicker, like it was pressing in on me. There was something else in the woods, something that didn't belong. I didn't see it at first. I didn't hear it. I just felt it. A presence lurking just beyond the edge of my vision, watching. And with each night, that feeling grew stronger. You ever get that prickling sensation on the back of your neck, like someone's eyes are drilling into you from somewhere unseen? That's what it was, a constant, suffocating feeling of being watched. The locals around there, they don't talk much, and when they do, their voices drop to whispers. They warned me, they told me stories about the river wives, spirits said to haunt the water's edge, women who lure the unwary into the cold, dark river, where they vanish forever. I laughed it off at first. Folklore, I told myself. Just tales to keep people away from dangerous waters at night. But as the nights wore on, I started to believe there was something more to those stories. It wasn't just the locals' warnings. It was the small things that didn't add up. The way the birds would suddenly fall silent as dusk approached, as if something scared them into stillness. The clocks inside the cabin would stop, frozen at strange hours that didn't make sense. I would glance at windows, and sometimes Just for a flicker of a second, I'd catch a reflection that wasn't mine, an unfamiliar face watching from behind me, or eyes that weren't human staring back from the darkness. Then there were the noises. At first, it was soft knocking, so faint I thought it was the wind or a branch scraping the cabin. But the knocking kept coming. Sometimes it was just a single knock, slow and deliberate, like a warning. Other times it was frantic, echoing through the silent night like a desperate plea. And no matter where I looked, I could find no source. The doors were locked, the windows shut tight. Still, the knocking came. One night, I woke to the slow creaking of a door opening, despite my having locked every single one before bed. I swear I heard footsteps in the hallway, soft and careful, pacing just beyond the rooms. But when I got up, there was no one there, only the empty, cold cabin staring back at me. My dreams started to bleed into reality. I would hear whispers calling my name in my sleep, voices so soft and close it was like they were right beside my ear. And sometimes, when I woke, the furniture would be shifted, chairs pulled away from the table, a rug slightly askew. Things moved just enough to make me doubt my own memory. I was losing grip on what was real. Sleep became impossible. Every night I'd lie awake, listening to the creeping sounds that came from outside, the quiet lapping of the river that never seemed to stop, and the faintest hints of laughter or crying carried on the wind. The fear was like a living thing, wrapping tighter and tighter around me until I felt trapped. I started to believe that whatever was out there wasn't just haunting the woods, it was haunting me. I want you to understand, I'm not just telling this as some ghost story to scare you. This was real. The cabin in the woods, the no signal, the creepy noises that seemed to come from nowhere, and that unexplained presence that I could never shake. The sleepless nights that stretched on forever, each one worse than the last. I'm telling you, because I need someone to know. Someone who might believe me. You seem like you've seen strange things to someone who understands that the world has shadows where darkness breeds things that defy explanation. But please, promise me you won't try to find that place. Don't follow the whispers that call from the riverbank. Don't go looking for the river wives or the faces in the reflection. Some things are better left alone. Some secrets are traps, designed to pull you in and never let go. I'm telling you this because the weight of it is crushing me. I can't escape it, not even here. The river's voice still calls to me in my dreams. The eyes I saw in the woods still haunt my every waking moment. I want to believe that sharing this story will set me free. But deep down, I'm afraid it's already too late. So please listen carefully and keep your distance. Because out there, in that dark, silent place, something waits, and it's watching. The cabin was supposed to be my refuge, a quiet place where the noise of the world couldn't reach me. Nestled deep in the woods near the river, it looked almost forgotten, weathered wood stained a dull gray, shingles curling at the edges like old cracked skin. It sat alone on a slight rise, surrounded by towering pines whose branches reached out like skeletal fingers. The windows were small and grimy, as if no one had bothered to clean them in years. The porch creaked beneath my feet the first time I stepped onto it, a slow, groaning sound that felt like the cabin itself was warning me not to come inside. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of damp wood and something else I couldn't place. Maybe decay. The floorboards were uneven, and in some places, warped and cracked. A fireplace sat cold and empty against one wall, its hearth stained black by years of ash and smoke. The furniture was sparse, an old rocking chair, a rickety table, a bed with a mattress so thin it felt like sleeping on bare springs. But despite its decrepit state, the cabin had a strange pull, as if it was waiting for someone to come back and unlock its secrets. The isolation was total. No neighbors for miles, and cell service was non-existent. I knew that going in. That was part of the appeal. But what I hadn't expected was how deeply alone it made me feel. like the trees themselves were watching, whispering to each other in a language I couldn't understand. At first, I thought it was just my imagination. Paranoia born from too many late nights and the oppressive silence that settled after sunset. But the locals, when I finally dared to ask about the area, didn't laugh or dismiss my concerns. Their eyes grew cold. Their voices dropped to hushed tones. "They say you don't want to be out here after dark," an old man told me one afternoon in the nearest town. A small cluster of buildings that seemed stuck in another era. The river wives they watch. They listen. They wait for the unwary. I didn't know what to make of it. River wives sounded like folklore meant to scare children into staying close to home, like stories about witches or ghosts. But the unease in the man's voice was unmistakable. I could see it in the way his hands trembled as he lit his cigarette, and the quick glances he cast toward the dense woods bordering the town. Other locals were quieter, but no less wary. A woman in the general store, eyes downcast, whispered about missing hikers and strange lights along the riverbank. Another mentioned hearing voices carried on the wind at night, voices that didn't belong to any human. Back at the cabin, the sense of being watched grew heavier each day. It wasn't always something I could see or hear. It was more like a weight pressing on my chest, a sensation crawling under my skin. Sometimes, when I looked out the window, I thought I caught movement between the trees, something gliding just beyond the edge of vision. Too quick or shadowed to identify, the small things started adding up. The clocks inside the cabin, all old and mechanical, would stop at odd times. Always around 3 past midnight, never the same clock twice. I'd wind them up again, only to find them frozen the next morning. It was subtle enough that I questioned my memory at first, chalking it up to fatigue or the cabin's drafty, uneven air currents. Birds, normally abundant and noisy in these woods, would fall silent as dusk crept in. Not just quiet, they vanished. No cause, no fluttering wings, no rustle of feathers. It was like the forest held its breath, waiting for something. On some evenings, the only sound was the river, its waters churning steadily, carrying an undertone of whispering that I could never quite place. One night, I caught something in a reflection that wasn't mine. I was brushing my teeth in the bathroom when I glanced up at the mirror and saw a pale face staring back. It wasn't my own. The eyes were dark, too large, and filled with a hollow sadness that routed me to the spot. I blinked, and it was gone. The mirror only showed me then. Sometimes, shadows would move just beyond my sight, shifting unnaturally. Once, I swear I saw a figure standing at the edge of the porch, only to disappear the moment I turned to look directly. The hairs on my arms would prick up, and a cold draft would snake through the cabin. Even though all windows and doors were sealed tight, even the river seemed wrong. Its surface sometimes shimmered with a strange oily sheen, reflecting shapes that weren't really there. On a few occasions, I thought I heard soft crying carried over the water, childlike sobs that sent a shiver down my spine. The sense of being watched didn't just stay outside. At times, when I sat quietly in the cabin's main room, I felt eyes on me, something waiting just beyond sight, patient and unblinking. It was the kind of feeling that doesn't leave when you blink or look away. It burrows deep, a quiet menace that coils beneath your skin. I tried to ignore it, telling myself I was alone in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by old wood and wild stories. But the woods had their secrets, and they were starting to seep into the cabin, into my life, into my very mind. The nights grew heavier, the darkness pressing against the cabin walls like a living thing. It started with the knocking. At first it was faint, soft taps that could have been a branch brushing against the side of the house or a raccoon trying to get in. But soon, the knocking became deliberate and rhythmic, persistent enough to stir me from sleep. It wasn't just once or twice. It would go on for minutes at a time, echoing through the stillness. I'd sit up, heart pounding, straining to locate the source, but every time I checked, there was nothing outside but empty air and swaying trees. The knocking never came during the day. It was always after midnight, when the world was quietest, and every creak and groan seemed magnified. Sometimes it would come in bursts, sometimes steady and slow, but always with an unsettling patience, like someone or something was waiting for me to answer. I stopped trying to ignore it after a week. Instead, I found myself glued to the window, watching into the shadows beyond the porch light, searching for any sign of a visitor. But the woods were empty, still, silent. One night, I was certain I heard the door open. I had locked every entrance before bed, double-checked the windows, and yet, there it was, a soft creak, as if the old wood was pushed ajar. I froze, listening. The wind was calm. No branches scraped the siding. The door's sound came from inside the cabin. I swallowed hard and held my breath, waiting for more. Nothing followed. When I finally mustered the courage to check, the door was shut tight, just as I'd left it. No footprints in the dust, no disturbance. It was impossible, but the sound was real. After that night, I began to notice other strange things. Furniture shifted. The old rocking chair I'd placed in the corner would sometimes be turned slightly, facing the fireplace or the door, as if someone had been sitting there and watching me. A stack of books would topple over without cause. Even the small kitchen table seemed to move just a few inches, but enough to unsettle me when I found it out of place in the morning. I stopped trying to fix these things. Why fight it? The cabin was alive in a way I didn't understand. Dreams came next, vivid and confusing. They started as quiet whispers, faint voices calling my name, snippets of conversations I couldn't quite catch. But over time, the whispers grew into full sentences, chilling and specific. I'd wake, heart racing, and realize what I'd heard in sleep was happening in reality. The knocking on the door from the night before, the sudden movement of the chair, the creaking floorboards when no one was there. The dreams and waking events mirrored each other with uncanny precision, blurring the line between sleep and waking life. In one dream, I saw a pale woman standing by the river's edge, her eyes hollow and lips moving silently. When I woke, I found muddy footprints leading down to the water. No explanation, no signs of how they got there or where they ended. The footprints were there, just like in the dream, as if the woman's ghost had left them for me to find. The sounds in the cabin became impossible to ignore. Soft footsteps echoed through the hallways at odd hours, slow and deliberate, never quick enough to be a raccoon or a possum. At times, a faint humming would fill the room like a lullaby sung from nowhere and everywhere all at once. It wrapped around me in the dark, a strange comfort and a threat all at once. One night, the knocking returned in a furious rhythm, faster, sharper, like a warning. I didn't dare answer. Instead, I sat in the rocking chair, gripping my knees, my ears straining for any other sound. Then, the door creaked open again slowly this time, and a cold wind swept through the cabin, blowing out my candle. In the darkness, I thought I saw movement just beyond the doorway, a shadow, or maybe something more. I told myself it was a nightmare, a trick of my mind exhausted by isolation and fear. But the evidence was there. The shifted furniture, the cold drafts where no windows had opened, the footprints by the river. The cabin wasn't just old wood and dust. It was a place where something waited, something patient and persistent. The nights stretched on, each one darker and heavier than the last. Sleep became a battle. I was exhausted but afraid to close my eyes, terrified of what might follow in dreams. The boundary between the waking world and the night blurred. I stopped trusting my senses. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of a figure reflected in the window, or see eyes staring at me from the shadows beyond the porch light. Every night, the knocking came, a cruel reminder that I was not alone. Every night, the door creaked open, despite every lock and latch. Every night, whispers filled my dreams, growing louder and more insistent. Every morning, I woke to find the cabin subtly changed, rearranged by unseen hands. And yet, I stayed, because even as the fear gnawed at my sanity, a part of me was drawn deeper into the mystery, compelled to uncover what haunted these woods. But with every night that passed, I wondered if I was losing myself to whatever waited in the darkness, waiting for me to finally answer the knocking. After weeks of sleepless nights and creeping dread, I reached a breaking point. I couldn't keep living in that cabin, surrounded by whispers and shadows that seemed to crawl under my skin. Something about the place was changing me, wearing me down, pulling me deeper into a world I wasn't meant to see. But before I could leave, I found something I wasn't prepared for. It started with a loose floorboard near the fireplace. I was pacing one restless afternoon when my foot caught on it, and a sharp click echoed beneath me. Kneeling down, I pried the board loose with trembling hands and discovered an old, dust-covered journal. The leather was cracked, stained with age, but surprisingly intact. The pages inside were yellowed and brittle, filled with cramped handwriting in faded ink. I took the journal out and sat by the window, the late afternoon sun filtering through the cracked glass. The first entry was dated over 100 years ago. It belonged to a man named Elias, who had once lived in the cabin's original form before it became the crumbling relic I knew. As I read, a story unfolded, one that explained much of the unease I'd felt but also plunged me deeper into fear. Elias wrote about the river wives, not as a legend, but as something very real. Something ancient. According to the journal, the river wives were spirits, or perhaps something older tied to the river that curved just beyond the trees. They weren't benevolent, gentle figures, as the local folktales sometimes softened them to be. No, Elias described them as guardians of a terrible secret, fierce and merciless. They appeared to those who dared to speak their names or look too closely at the riverbank, and once seen, they never left. What caught me most was a repeated warning, scrawled in hurried, desperate handwriting across several pages. Do not speak to the river wives. Do not look for them. They watch from the shadows, waiting. To speak is to invite death. Elias's entries grew darker as he wrote about strange noises at night. Soft cries drifting across the water, footsteps following him through the woods, and shadows moving just out of sight. He confessed to hearing whispers that no human should hear, voices that promised knowledge but demanded sacrifices in return. Then, on the last page, the handwriting became frantic, almost illegible. They come when the moon is low. I fear I will not see the dawn. I slammed the journal shut, my hands shaking. I had felt those same things. The whispers, the footsteps, the cold watching eyes. It wasn't just my imagination or isolation. It was real. That night, I wandered through the cabin, the journal burning a hole in my pocket. I felt drawn to the far wall of the living room, a place I hadn't really examined before. As I stood there, the hair on my arms prickled, and my breath caught in my throat. Faint carvings appeared, etched into the wood, almost invisible in the dim light. Worn by time, but unmistakably deliberate. There, carved into the old paneling, was a warning. Symbols I couldn't understand, but the shape of a woman's face twisted, distorted, watching. Beneath it, words scratched deep into the grain. Speak not their names. Beware the river wives. They are patient. I stepped back, heart hammering, the weight of the cabin's history crashing down on me. It was as if the house itself was trying to tell me to run, but I was frozen in place. The following nights confirmed what the journal had warned. The knocking became frantic, almost desperate, pounding at the walls like a warning or a plea. Doors flung open and slammed shut with a force that rattled the entire cabin. Whispers filled every corner, voices repeating the same phrase over and over. A chant I couldn't understand, but felt as cold as ice in my blood. One night, I swore I saw them, standing at the edge of the river, faces pale and shimmering, their eyes hollow and empty. The river wives, just like Elias described. They didn't speak, but their presence was suffocating, a silent demand for attention. I wanted to turn away, to run, but my feet were rooted to the ground. My gaze locked on theirs. Their mouths opened in silent song, a soundless melody that filled my mind with visions of the river swallowing whole families, of whispered curses passed down through generations, of a hunger that never fades. I fell to my knees, clutching the journal like a talisman, tears streaming down my face. The river wives weren't just spirits of the water. They were something far older, something hungry and patient, tied to this land in a way I could barely comprehend. Since that night, the cabin has felt less like a shelter and more like a cage. The air is thick with their presence, the shadows deeper and darker than ever. I'm not sure if I'm still myself or just a vessel for their story. But one thing is clear, they are always watching. I can't say I believe in ghosts or curses, but after everything I've seen and heard, I have no choice but to accept that some things are beyond explanation. The river wives are real, and they want something from me. I tried to leave. God, I really tried. After everything, the whispers, the faces at the river, the carved warnings, I packed a bag and slipped out under the cover of darkness, thinking that once I was far enough from that cursed place, I could breathe again. But the forest didn't want me to leave. The moment I stepped onto the dirt road leading away from the cabin, something shifted. The trees around me seemed to lean in closer, their branches twisting and writhing like fingers reaching out to snatch me back. I kept walking, telling myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But as I moved, the path bent impossibly, curling back in on itself like a loop. Every direction I took led me deeper into the woods. The same groves and tangled underbrush, repeating like a nightmarish pattern. The sun barely touched the ground through the thick canopy, casting long, unnatural shadows that seemed to flicker and pulse just beyond my vision. At some point, I stopped even trying to navigate. The air grew colder, thicker, and the silence pressed against me like a physical weight. It was then I realized something far worse than being lost was happening. The forest was alive, but not in any way I had ever known. It wasn't just the trees or the wind. It was something else. Something that watched with unblinking eyes from the darkness between the trunks. I felt it behind me before I dared to look. The unmistakable sense of being followed, stalked by a presence that never stepped fully into view. Every time I glanced back, there was nothing there, just empty space and the rustling of leaves. But I knew it was there, waiting. The moonlight barely touched the path, but I could see the glint of eyes, countless pairs, scattered through the forest, reflecting a cold, pale light. They were not human. They belonged to something else. Something ancient. Panic rose in my chest, but my legs refused to move. It was as if the earth itself was holding me in place, a trap laid long before I ever set foot on this land. The whispers returned, faint and haunting, just on the edge of hearing. The voices of the river wives, their song curling around me like smoke, weaving madness into my thoughts. I warned you, they seemed to say. There is no leaving. Days, or maybe weeks, lost all track of time passed in this endless twilight. I can't be sure how long I wandered, or if I ever truly left the forest. The boundaries between past, present, and future blurred, the laws of reality bending until I no longer knew what was real. Sometimes I thought, I glimpsed the cabin again through the trees, its silhouette warped and flickering like a dying flame. Other times, I felt hands brush my skin or heard a soft cry, like a child calling from just beyond the shadows. And always, the eyes watched, patient and cold. The last thing I remember clearly was a night drenched in fog. The river, swollen and dark, appeared at my feet, and from its surface rose shapes with faces that were both beautiful and terrible. The river wives. They sang without sound, their mouths moving in an impossible rhythm. I felt drawn to them, pulled like a moth to a flame I knew would burn me. I can't say what happened next. Did I step into the water and become part of their endless song? Or did I finally break free, only to carry their curse wherever I go? I'm not sure if I am still here, or just a ghost bound to retell this story. The line between reality and nightmare is thinner than I ever imagined. Now, when I close my eyes, I still see their faces, the river wives growing from the riverbank, their eyes hollow and watching. The forest calls me back, but I can't go. Not yet. If you ever find that place, if you hear the whispering voices, or see the flicker of faces by the water, promise me you won't stay. Don't speak their names. Don't look for them, because the forest doesn't just trap your body, it traps your soul. And once you're caught, there may be no escape. I haven't been able to sleep since. It's been months, maybe more, but every night feels like the first night I was trapped there, caught in that endless twilight between the trees, haunted by the cold, unblinking eyes watching me from the dark. The silence of the forest still fills my ears, more oppressive than any noise could ever be. It's like the shadows themselves whispered to me, reminding me that I'm never truly alone. Sometimes I think I'm losing my mind. There's this constant pressure behind my eyes, a weight pressing down on my thoughts. Sleep doesn't come easy anymore, and when it does, it's never peaceful. I dream of the river dark, swollen, and strange, and the faces that rise from its depths, twisting and shifting like smoke in the wind. The river wives, their mouths move silently, singing their wordless song that somehow burrows deep into my soul. It's a song I can't forget, no matter how much I try. The dreams bleed into my waking hours, too, on quiet afternoons, when the sun is setting just right, and the light filters softly through the curtains. I swear I can catch glimpses of them in the corners of my vision. Faces pale and hollow, reflected in windows, or the surface of my coffee. Sometimes I hear the faintest rustle of fabric, or the brush of wet hair against skin, when there's no one there. It's like a shadow clings to me now, part of my skin, part of my breath. I've tried to tell myself it was all just the stress of isolation, the mind playing tricks after weeks spent alone in the woods. But deep down, I know that something followed me back. I carry it with me. The feeling of being watched doesn't end at the forest's edge. Sometimes, late at night, I feel a presence in the room with me, just beyond the reach of the light. I won't turn to look. I've learned that much, but the fear claws at me all the same. If you ever find yourself near that place, near the river where the trees grow twisted and the water runs cold, please don't stay. Don't let curiosity pull you in the way it did me. It's a trap, an ancient snare set by something that waits patiently in the shadows, eager to claim another lost soul. I don't know what it is exactly. Something older than the land itself, watching, hungry, and relentless. Burn it if you can. Burn the cabin, burn the trees, if that's possible. Destroy anything that ties that darkness to our world. I don't want anyone else to hear the whispers in the night, or feel those eyes on their back. I wish I could go back and stop myself before I ever set foot on that dirt road. But now, all I can do is warn you, don't listen too closely to the stories that seem like just tales. Sometimes, the worst stories are the ones that are true. I don't know how much longer I'll be able to hold on to what's left of myself. The line between waking and dreaming blurs every day. The memories aren't just memories anymore. They're shadows slipping between my fingers, twisting into something I can't quite grasp. I'm afraid that soon, the forest won't just be behind me, but inside me. So please, if you hear this, if you find this story, listen carefully. Don't be like me. Don't ignore the warnings, the signs, the fear that prickles your skin when you're near the water or the trees. Trust it. Run if you have to. And if you can, promise me one last thing. Burn it all. Because some places, some things, aren't meant to be found, and some stories aren't meant to be lived. Have you ever heard footsteps when you were supposed to be alone? Or maybe a whisper carried on the wind that didn't belong to anyone you knew? Sometimes, it's the little things, a shadow flickering just outside your window, a cold breath against your neck when no one's there. If any of this sounds familiar, then you know what it's like to feel watched, to sense something lurking just beyond the edge of your sight. I read every single comment, every story you share, because those moments, those terrifying, unexplainable moments, connect us. They remind me I'm not the only one who's faced the unknown. So if you've ever experienced something strange, something that made your skin crawl or your heart pound, don't be afraid to tell me about it below. But here's a warning. Sometimes sharing these stories draws attention. Sometimes it invites what we wish to avoid. So if you choose to listen to the next story, don't do it alone. Keep a light on, stay close to something real and grounded, and if you ever find yourself near a place that feels wrong, the kind where the air grows heavy and the silence is too loud, don't linger. Walk away. Run if you have to, because some things shouldn't be disturbed. Thanks for listening. I'm reading, I'm watching, and you're never really alone.